One of the most amazing things about becoming a grandfather is realizing that you've lost Sundays now. Because if I don't visit my granddaughter, then I become a bad grandfather. So I have to figure out the whole entire balance of like how much time you're actually seeing the person. And there's a lot of pressure to hold the baby, and I love holding babies, but I don't like holding them when they're sleeping the whole time. I feel like it's like a waste of time almost. But, because I have so many other things I want to do. And so the challenge of being a young grandfather is that your ambition sometimes outweighs your responsibilities, and you have to choose between the things you want to do and the things that you have to do, things that you love to do versus the things that you need to do. All right, we're talking about love, and this is part 2. And if you are joining us today, then you may have, and you missed last week, you can find that class. I posted it on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called youtube.com/Chazak. That's where many of the classes, not all the classes, many of the classes are posted there for review. And certainly the first part of this class is there. If anyone ever needs any of the sheets, any of the classes that are up there, let me know. I'm happy to forward you my my Safari links to the classes. Okay, so we all know this pasuk. Pasuk says, "Lo tikom lo titor et bnei amecha v'ahavta l'recha kamocha ani Hashem." There's a mitzvah over here not to take revenge and to love your fellow, or to love your neighbor, as often translated, or to love your friend, recha as a friend, like yourself. And we have lots of questions over here. Is it really possible to love somebody else like you love yourself? Now, we just got this gentleman over here who's very courageously shaking his head. No, it's impossible. I'm just joking. I don't know. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Maybe you disagree with the statement. But I think that the answer is like this. The truth is that I think it's possible. I think anything is possible. But there is something we need to overcome. And last week we spoke about these 2 drives that were given to every single human being. The first drive is to understand it in the proper context that each of us were created in the image of God. Okay? God created us in His image, and to be created in God's image means that we are truly, at our nature, at our best, we are givers. And when we align ourselves with that idea, when we see ourselves living a life of truly giving, that is where we tap into our God state, and that's where we are our happiest. When we are living a life of superficiality and we're in our taking states, we are unhappy. And therefore, this verse makes this claim over here, which is counterintuitive for one very simple reason, that as we mature and as we get older, we have a role reversal in thinking about what we truly are as human beings. Are we individuals that are here to take, or are we individuals that are here to give? And it's very confusing because then we go out into the world and we work and we get jobs and we have careers, and the whole entire society around us is built on this premise of giving and taking, giving and taking, giving and taking. That's what barter is. Right? And now, so you will agree that there is some merit to a barter system or to even a system of finance. You're selling things, you have commerce. There is always going to be a space where there's going to be a need for you to go ahead to give and receive. There is no reality where there is no receivers. That means that there has to be someone who's always receiving. There has to be a taker in order for there to be a giver. Okay? The receiver actually transforms the giver into a giver. You can't be a human being without there being this exchange. Well, if that's true, then what is the whole purpose of this whole entire conversation? We're talking about the idea of love. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Can we as human beings get ourselves into a state where one is able to truly give unconditionally? And I know that it's difficult to hear this, and I know that it's difficult to fully appreciate this, but I'm going to argue that it is possible. It is unnatural in your natural state to want that because you've been programmed to be a receiver your whole entire lives. Since the time you were born, everything has been done for you. So therefore, for the first 12, 13 years of our lives, we have been pre-programmed into being in the receptive receiving mode. And the truth is, I'm not sure if you're followers of technology, but I am. If you read today, there was a massive breakthrough in artificial intelligence. There's a new program called Claude 3. And Claude 3 is a new AI algorithm, a large language model, an LLM, which beats ChatGPT 4 and beats Gemini. It is the fastest, the smartest artificial intelligent program out there right now. It is unreal. It is so fast. It blew away everybody. No one can understand how fast these things are moving. And it is remarkable. We are truly living in remarkable times. We are going to be living in a time of abundance, which means that there's going to be in our futures a time where there is zero chesronot, there is no lacking. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? We spoke about it a little bit last week. If I gave you everything, what am I doing to you? Why doesn't God give us everything that we want? If God is this infinite being that is capable of doing anything and everything, why does he create us in a state of lacking? Yeah, you raising your hand? Go ahead. Yeah, to what? To join him, to partner with him. What else do you want to add?
If there was no lack, then nobody would be able to give.
If there's no lack, there's no give. But that's true. So, but why am I created in a state of my own lacking? Forget about my desire to give to others, right? But what about me as a human being? What about my own wants, my own needs, my own desires? Okay, true. There's a growth aspect, and I think that the answer. I think what you're all alluding to is this idea that God wants to make you into this one thing called independent. God does not want you to be dependent, right? We said this last week. We said, "Soneh matnot yichyeh," one who hates gifts will live, right? Why? Is that true, by the way? One who hates gifts will live? Does everyone agree with that statement?
If he wanted you to be independent.
King Solomon says, "Soneh matnot yichyeh." One who hates gifts will live. Why is that true?
If he wanted you to be independent, wouldn't he give you everything that you need? This way he's programming you to be
Great, that's true. If God truly wanted you to be independent, wouldn't he give you everything that you need? The assumption is that you don't have everything that you need.
You're saying that
I'm saying two things. One is you went back a step, I went forward. Okay, the argument that God has not given us everything that we need, you can make that argument. I'm going to argue that it's true there are things that we don't have, but that doesn't mean that we don't have everything that we need. There's a difference. Right? I do this with my children all the time. There's a difference between needing something and wanting something. And all too often we kind of confuse the wants with the needs. And I often tell one of my daughters, when Emma says to me, I need that, I'm like, no, you don't need that candy, you want that candy. There's a difference between the need and the want. And we're not careful enough with our own words to make that distinction between what we need and what we want. And therefore, I would argue that God has given us everything that we need. The trouble is that our ambition is way greater than everything. We have all these wants, and the wants and the needs are two separate things. Okay, so I think we have what we need. The question is, what about our wants? But the idea moving forward now, right? Is it true that one who hates gifts will live? Crickets. Right? What does it mean that one who hates gifts will live? Is that true? The way I understand it is like this, okay? I'm sure if we looked at everyone's financials in this room, we'll find that there are different people on different socioeconomic statuses, right? Different people have different amounts of wealth, okay? And I think everyone here would agree that there's a sweet spot for how much wealth is enough versus too much, right? Everyone here agrees in premise that having too much of anything is bad. Any extreme, we've spoken about this in Judaism, is considered bad. Any extreme is bad, right? However, if I was to ask, just do a quick survey in this room, how much money is just the right amount of money to have, where you have what you need, right? You have your wants and you're good. Now, I'm sure that we'll get varying numbers, right? But I think we'll all agree that if you had about, $500 million in your bank accounts, right, that you pretty much could get whatever you need and what you want, okay? What's the first thing you do when you get $500 million? Aside from investing it, now you're spending it, When you invested it, you set it up, you're going to get your monthly, allowance, and so on. So what's the first thing you do? What's that? What?
stop working.
You stop working, okay. After you stop working, what's the second thing you do? What's that? Maaser. Okay, you're a very religious crowd. Okay, go on a trip. Before you go on a trip, okay, the first thing you do is you hire help. Right? Before you do anything, you get an assistant. Because now you got to manage everything. Okay, let's get you guys thinking about wealth. Okay, you're going to get all that money. The first thing you want is assistants. Okay, you need staff. You need people to answer to you. You need people to work for you. So the first thing you do is you call somebody with a hiring agency. You want to hire competent, capable people to work for you. That's the first thing you're going to do. This way you could amplify your money and do more with your time. You don't want to have to book your own ticket. You don't have to go ahead and just sit there and figure out which. You're going to have people coming and presenting things to you because you're a boss now. You have 500 million. Just joking about. I know you're going to go excited, right? So the first thing you do is you're going to go ahead and hire people to work for you, okay? And now, God willing, you're going to find that special person. You're going to get married, and you're going to have children. And your children are raised in an environment where they have 3 full-time staff people in the house, okay? Not including the butler, not including everyone, all the other people that are working for you. Now, the children of this arrangement, because now you've taken your 500 million and you made it to 1 billion. Okay, you're killing it. Okay, the children are raised with $1 billion, okay, and all the staff you could possibly imagine. Are those kids stronger or weaker? Okay, chaluke deot, as they say, stronger versus weaker. Okay, why are they weaker?
They don't have to do anything for themselves.
Yes.
That's how you raise them.
Okay, true. Well, we're just going to go with most people, right? Most people, unfortunately, don't know how to create boundaries. Most people, are there exceptions? 100%. We're going to go with Rove. We're going to go with the majority. The majority of people with crazy amounts of money, okay, have a hard time raising children with limits. And I want you to know, because I get these phone calls all the time. I got the phone call on Friday. Rabbi, what do I do? You know, my wife, I gave her a $10,000 a month allowance for clothing, and she went over this week, and I found out she spent an extra $4,000 on my daughter. My daughter has her own $5,000 allowance a month on clothing. And she dipped into her, and I don't know how to create boundaries. And I'm like, yeah, you got problems. Right? I can't think of these conversations. Right? And so now good people, they're intelligent, educated, universities, good schools, whatever it is, and they know what's right, but depending on where you are, it's very hard to create that balance, especially in a world of tremendous abundance. Right? You're living in Manhattan, you're living down the street of $1 million row, and you're going to see all kinds of things. And yeah, I could justify spending $1,200 on jeans. I wanted to see what they spent it on. $1,200 on a pair of jeans. That's tuition a month for one of my kids. Can spend it on jeans, right? So yeah, okay, whatever. It's not crazy. I mean, someone in this room might be wearing a pair of $1,200. I don't know. And maybe you could justify it. I can't, right? So now it's not just about the clothing. It's about, well, how do we go ahead and prioritize the things that we have versus things that we need? So I would argue that for the mostly it's true that there are some exceptions that will raise and give their kids everything they need to do the right. They'll create the limitation. They'll create the limitation for themselves, for their family, and they'll teach them how to go ahead and live responsibly. But I'm going to have to assume that unfortunately most people don't know how to do that. And if most people are given the opportunity, if you're given that special card we spoke about last week, it's very hard to go ahead and not rely on it to get all the things that you want. And therefore, I would say that what ends up happening most of the time, this has been my experience, and if anyone, I'm sure there are rare cases where it's not true, but my experience has shown me that when you see kids being raised with extreme wealth, unfortunately, those kids have what I call lower bandwidth. Okay? You have lower bandwidth. You don't really know how to deal with the kitchen because you're never in the kitchen. You don't really know how to deal with you don't know how to do any of that stuff because you've been so far removed from it, and therefore your bandwidth. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just different. Right? And hopefully the parents could give them the staff they need to go ahead and live a life to be normal and so on and so forth. Right? But we see this, by the way. The Gemara in Gittin tells a story about how when the temple was being destroyed, there was a girl by the name of Martha, right? And Martha was her father, I forget his name, was a very wealthy fabric owner. And her whole entire life, everywhere she walked on a new piece of silk. There was some guy unraveling the silk in front of her, and everywhere she walked, she was just walking on silk. Okay, she had very silky, smoothie shoes. Okay, feet. Right now, the temple is destroyed. Okay, there's infighting happening in Jerusalem. There's starvation breaking out, and people are starving in the streets. Okay, and she's going out to find the piece of bread. Okay, and she goes out, and she ends up stepping on a piece of dung. Okay, or duty, for lack of a better word. Okay, and she steps on it. She realizes what she steps on. She drops dead. That's the end of the Gemara. Right? She can't handle that experience. Her whole life, she's been walking on silk, and now she has this moment where she steps on the excrement, the opposite of whatever silk is, and the whole experience is so traumatic that she drops dead from that experience. It's just she's dead. Right? And I think what the Gemara over there is speaking about is this idea that when you raise the bar to such a high level and allowing someone to go ahead and walk through on silk their whole entire lives and have that kind of luxury, When that stuff is no longer there, they have a very hard time handling anything that is something that you and I unfortunately have to go through all the time in New York City, right? Cleaning our shoes because some dog owner forgot to curve his dog, right? That happens. But you're not going to drop dead from it. You manage it. But it all depends on where you're coming from. When you have that super crazy amount of stuff, right, it lowers you. And therefore, what Shlomo Melech is saying, Soneh matnot yichyeh, the person who goes ahead and he hates gifts will live, because at the end of the day, if you're someone that is not dependent, not needing those other things, when the hardship comes or that stuff is not there, you become bigger and better. I'm saying this in the context of Claude 3. Okay, AI is something that I use all the time, and I'm guilty of using it because it makes my days much easier. I need to reference things, I need to check things, I need a summary of things, I need to check over. It's fascinating, it's fast, it allows me to be more productive, but at the same time, it makes us all weaker because it doesn't allow us to develop the bandwidth we need to become more developed individuals. When I go ahead and I kind of like let go and I give it to the app to help me, I'm doing more by doing less, and therefore I'm making myself weaker, not stronger. Okay, so when we talk about this idea of becoming a lover of life, it's predicated on this idea that each one of us has to choose to want to become givers versus takers. That's why there's a commandment. Can you command love? And the answer is yes. And we'll explain God willing more as we move on. Question?
On that idea with using the idea to weaker versus stronger.
Yeah.
So what would you say about your many great-grandmother who probably sewed her own clothing by hand, and then all of a sudden the sewing machine came out, and there was a faster, better way for her to utilize her time.
Yeah.
So same idea with AI in this case, and then applying it to this. What is the boundary between utilizing your time wisely and using the tools at hand between making yourself more effective and then making yourself weaker?
So, how many people here were born into a home with central air conditioning? Right? It's like a weird thing to say, right? But like, I mean, I didn't have air conditioning in my house. We had an air conditioning unit. We had like a window unit, okay? And I only had we had 2 rooms in our house that had air conditioning in it, right? It was the living room and the dining room, right? The kitchen didn't have air conditioning, and our bedrooms didn't have air conditioning, and like actually essentially my sister's room was like off there, so she had air conditioning also kind of by default. If you left the door open up and the AC was high enough, she got AC in there as well. Okay, now, so is it better to have air conditioning or not to have air conditioning? Obviously, we need air conditioning, right? We're so used to it. Now, what's interesting is what I find is like this. Kids that grew up in homes without central AC can tolerate fluctuation in heat more so than people who grew up with AC, right? You're just less tolerant because you've got used to a certain type of conditioning, and therefore, you're going to go ahead and you have a hard time, and it's really hot out, you're going to go ahead and freak out faster, you're going to have a meltdown faster, you need the AC on now, right? But because of the way I grew up, like I don't need AC on full blast. I don't need it to be at 69 degrees every single time I walk into my house. Like I could deal with it could be at 73 degrees. I don't need that feeling of ice cold all the time. Now I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's different, right? But because I was raised with less, right? I can manage with less, and my ability to manage with less makes me now. As to answer your question, were people better off before machines, dishwashers, and whatever it is? It's hard for me to make that argument. I think you could argue yes, that it's better to have the machines than not to have the machines, right? It's certainly better to have air conditioning than not having the air conditioning. As long as I'm aware of the fact that, hey, that these tools that we've created for man, okay, only work in a society that has the ability to use them. God forbid what happens if there's a massive EMP, electromagnetic pulse weapon that's used, and every single electrical grid is fried, and now you can't do anything. There's no more electricity. What happens to society? It'll be broken down to 2 groups of people. The people that are willing to adjust and live with less and make do with working harder because they have the bandwidth to go ahead and go through it, versus the people that are so lost in the lap of luxury they can't deal with not having their stuff, they're just going to die. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's a total extreme. It's an extreme. So yes, you can use it, but be mindful of the fact that it makes you a little bit weaker. Someone have a question over here? Yeah.
Changing to a sewing machine.
Yeah.
I think that works. Like, it's not exactly parallel
No, I'd say even something like, listen, like, I have a tree that fell in my front yard lawn, and I'm still cutting it, and I got myself a chainsaw, right? And I decided that I'm going to spend time like just cutting this tree. And I've spent the last my weekends, literally looking at my yard, and it's a massive tree. And I thought it would take me a couple of hours. It's taking me a little bit longer. I'm like 50% done now at this point. Okay, and now and I have this amazing thing. Like I have a battery operated chainsaw, and I go there. I'm like, and it's so cool. I'm like cutting the tree, right? And I'm making logs out of it. And I'm going to use it for a campfire, God willing. In the summer, you're all welcome to come and watch me burn with the wood. But the two things. One is I'm like, holy cow! Can you imagine how difficult this would be if I had to use like an axe? Right, I would be here forever. But first of all, even just using a saw and taking the saw and like grabbing the pieces of wood and moving it into a pile, my fingers are sore. Like my hands are so sore from saw. They're sore from like I don't use those muscles to like lift wood and branches and swing them across my yard. I don't do any of that stuff. And therefore, I'm finding myself these newfound muscles that I've ignored for so long through this whole action. Now, what would the world look like if we didn't have chainsaws? I'm not saying we shouldn't have chainsaws. We should have the chainsaws. I'm not saying we should use the technology. All I'm saying is be mindful that the technology is wonderful, but at the same time, the gift that it gives us is that freedom, but it makes us weaker in the process. That's all I'm saying. And you have to be aware of it. That's all. Be aware of the fact that it's there. It's making you weaker. That is the analogy, and the reason why we're describing it is because we're talking about something that you and I are taking from. Okay? We're taking from. Okay? And therefore, when you and I are taking from something, okay, that is, we're not hating the gifts, okay, we're using the gifts. Just be mindful that it makes us weaker. You know what? If Elon Musk figures out how to make Optimus affordable, okay, the first thing everyone in this room should do is go ahead and get themselves a robot. 100%. Okay, definitely want a robot. I want a robot that can cook for me, that can sew for me, that can clean for me full time, nonstop. It's got to go ahead and works 24/7 all the time. That'll be amazing, right? And I recognize that help is fantastic, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't have the help. I'm not saying that if you don't have, lefi halacha. This is a little bit of a tangent for me. I want to really get back into the sheet because I want to go home early tonight. We have 20 minutes. So just this one point, I'm going to go into the sheet. We're going to go really fast, okay? So if a couple can afford for the wife not to be home, lahalacha, she doesn't have to take care of the kids. She has to go get an education. She has to get a career. She has to be equal with her spouse. If you could afford to have full-time, what? If you could have full-time, did you say amen? If you could have full-time, yeah, I'm sure of it. Lahalacha is that if you can go ahead and afford full-time cook, full-time help for the family, and it doesn't diminish the ability to care for the children, the halacha is that the wife does not have to be home. She has to go out and she has to be equal with her husband. The whole idea that he's out there and he's engaging in the world and developing himself while she's not is not necessarily, that is an arrangement we make for the benefit of the family. But if there is a man who's able to go ahead and have and provide all of that, his responsibility is to provide it, b'shefa. Because we want there to be a level of equality. We want to lift up all of society. We want to lift everybody, the men and the women, together. Okay? But that comes from a deep understanding of what it means to love. So let's look at what Rav Dessler says in number 2. He says, if one were to reflect that a person comes to love the one whom he gives, he would realize that the only reason the other person seems a stranger to him is because he has not yet given to him. He has not taken the trouble to show him friendly concern. If I give to someone, I feel close to him. I have a share in his blessing. It follows that if I were to start bestowing good upon everyone I come into contact with, I would soon feel that they are my relatives, all my loved ones, and now have a share in them all. My being has extended into all of them. When I actually live in a world where I'm truly caring for other people, if I stop thinking about what I'm taking from the other person and I start really thinking about, well, what can I do to help this other person? How can I support them? How can I help them? How can I share with them? How can I go ahead and give and provide for them? That is how you actually turn yourself into a taker, into a giver. This is how you fulfill the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Number 3, someone who has been granted the merit to reach the sublime level can understand the command. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. In its literal sense, as yourself, without distinction, as yourself in an actual fact. By giving to him of yourself, you will find in your soul that you are indeed one. You will feel in the clearest possible manner that he really is to you as yourself. But that only comes first not from the love. We often think that the love comes first. But in reality, we all already know this. We've heard it 1,000 times, that the way in which you generate the love is through the act of giving. The more you are providing, the more you are caring, the more you are supporting, the more you are sharing, the more you love that thing. The love comes later. The emotion comes through the act of first giving. I'm not talking about superficial love. I'm talking about true love. Okay? The love and the affection, number 4, which often prevail between man and wife, are something remarkable in human psychology. At first glance, you might think that this love has no true personal content. Perhaps it is merely something implanted in us by the Creator as part of a deep laid plan for the maintenance of the world. Just as hunger is given to us to ensure the preservation of the body, but it seems most unlikely to achieve this end. The biological urges of physical desire and yearning for the children would suffice. But this point is additional emotional attachment, right? So meaning, what is the point of having love in a relationship? But the whole purpose of the love itself is to go ahead and to make sure that society, continues. Then why do you have to have an emotional attachment? Just create a society that reproduces and finish. You're done. Khalas. What's the purpose of that emotional attachment? And he's going to say that the purpose of the emotional attachment is, if you look at number 5 in the bold, he is not even complete. He's not even a complete human being, right? In order to go ahead to be a normal human being, to be a developed person, is when that person, God bless your soul. Thank you so much. I was waiting for someone to be a giver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nehiyah b'dvaro. Does it make me weaker by taking the cup? By receiving the cup? Should I have gotten it myself? Probably. Anyway. Okay. So he's not even a complete human being. The purpose of being in that relationship, the reason for that attachment is to help us evolve. Okay, ready? I've married 229 couples over the last 13 years. Okay? That's a lot. And I've counseled thousands of young people getting married. And I've said this to you before, certainly to this group, that the people that come to me who think that the reason why they're getting married is because they're in love, I laugh. You're not in love. The reason why you're sitting in my office right now, and the reason why you want to get married is simply because you selfishly believe that you're going to benefit from being in this relationship. If you truly loved someone, you would never want to expose them to your own insanity, right? You protect them from your mishigas, right? But now, the nature of all things is such that, you're there for yourselves. And therefore, every relationship starts in the selfish place. And I'm okay with that. I just want you to be aware of it. Because if you're not aware of it, you start thinking that the whole entire purpose of the relationship is what you can take from that other person, not what you can give to them. And love cannot endure if all you are thinking about is what you take from them. And I believe this is what this Bereshit Rabbah means. And then look at number 6. On this basis, we can understand yet another remarkable fact. Why do we find so often that the husband-wife affection does not seem to last? And the answer is simple. Because people are takers, not givers. That's exactly what I tell my students. Number 7, this is why I always say to couples enjoy us in their wedding day. Filling your hearts at this moment is a wondrous desire to give pleasure and happiness to each other. Take care, my dear ones, that you strive to keep this desire always as fresh and as strong as it is at this present time. You should know that the moment you find yourselves beginning instead to make demands upon each other, your happiness is at an end. Remember that song, What Have You Done For Me Lately? Right? When you're singing that song in your marriage, you know you're in trouble. Right? If you're always asking, well, what did you do for me? Right? You're in trouble because now you're thinking about that selfish aspect in that relationship, but what am I gaining from the relationship? How am I benefiting from being in this relationship? For a marriage to evolve, to continue, for it to flourish, you have to be able to segue from the goal is independence to interdependence. You have to segue away from I'm taking to I am truly giving. Now, how does that work? Through one word, and it's not love. Love comes later. You know what comes first? The commitment to give. Once you are committed to giving unconditionally to somebody, that is when you are truly in love. Until then, it's infatuation. It's all kinds of crazy things like Cupid hitting you with an arrow that makes you blind. It's not real love. Love is the unconditional desire, the desire to give unconditionally, altruistically. That's what true love is. And all too often, young people, or even old people, think that they're in love, are in fact are not. They're infatuated. They're only thinking about what they take from as opposed to what they give to. How do you get there? On your wedding day, you have something called an nesu'in. right? The word nisuin comes from the word nes, which means to carry. The carrying ceremony, that's what happens under the chuppah. And what you're saying to each other is that no matter what happens, I am going to carry you. No matter how difficult you are, no matter how heavy you get, I am never going to let you down. I'm never letting go. You're my babe forever and ever. That's what I'm saying. That's what you're saying to each other, no matter what. Once that commitment is there, now you could work on building true love. But until that commitment is there, that love is dangerous. Why? Because how do you know that the person that you're loving, that you're giving to, is going to give back the same exact way to you? How do you know when that person is truly just taking from you and not really interested in giving to you? And this is where the Western ideas of relationships always fail. We're always searching for a hunger that we want to satiate, a desire that we want to go ahead and fulfill within ourselves. But that desire itself is intrinsically good and bad. It's good because we want you to go ahead and build family. Part of building family, part of getting married is the development of the self. It's the developing of a human being to recognize that they are not here to take from, but to give to. But when our lives become totally focused on this infatuation of pleasure and desire, no, you're in trouble. Number 5, right? Ohev kesev lo yispa kesev. Mi ohev v'hamon lo tzavua gam zehevel. A lover of money never has his fill of money, nor a lover of wealth his fill of income. This is too futile. Is that true? Does everyone think that King Solomon's statement is true? I do. I don't know anybody who's satiated with what they have. Gemara Sanhedrin, Rabbi Yehuda said once David heard the nature of his ordeal and sought to prevent himself from experiencing lust. He transformed his nighttime bed into his daytime bed, i.e., he engaged in intercourse with his wives during the day in an attempt to quell his lust. But the halacha is, right, that he forgot. There is a small limit of man. If he starves his limb, he does not overindulge it. It is satiated. But if he satiates his limb and overindulges sexual intercourse, it is starving, it is done more. Therefore, his plan had the opposite effect. Right? And this is how he ends up meeting Bathsheba. Okay? So the nature of all lust and desire is that when you go ahead and you feed yourself, you look at that pizza, you're like, oh, I want that pizza. Right? And you take the pizza. And you know what ends up happening? You just want more pizza. But okay, I'll have pizza earlier. It doesn't work like that. The way in which Chachamim have helped us understand how to deal with our desires is to recognize that the way to control it is to starve it. And to be able to give it what it needs at the right place and the right time. To always take what you want when you have an urge for something is dangerous. This is very, by the way, you see this the same idea. If everyone here familiar with the marshmallow test with children, right? If you delay the marshmallow by an hour, you get 2 of them, or by a day, 4 of them, whatever it is, and we know that 30 years later, those people that were able to delay had more success, right? This is exactly what Chachamim are talking about. That boundary that you can create for yourself is what leads to greatness, but it comes from your desire not to want to be a taker, but to be a giver. You can withhold. Did you know that a pig, is always hungry? That's why they're called pigs. But did you also know that pigs actually often, they will actually eat excrement, right? To satiate their deep desire for hunger, okay? And, in fact, the pig suffers no pain from its hunger. On the contrary, since it always it appeases itself, its life is one of continuous pleasure, but it's never satiated. It's different than our hunger. No man leaves this world to have his desires fulfilled. Therefore, our desires are often driven by a reality that is impossible for us to achieve. How do you go ahead and manage real desire and expectation? Because I would tell you right now that close to 80% of all struggles in marriage have to do, or even in relationships as well, have to do with this ridiculous managing the expectation of what you thought the relationship ought to be like. Because in your imagination, you know what you're thinking about? You're thinking about one thing. You're thinking about yourself. And you're thinking about what you're going to take from that relationship. So the frustration expressed itself from, this is not how I imagined receiving. And therefore, I want to help you make a little bit of a paradigm shift in your own head. The expectation that you need to really be having in your imagination is not what you're taking, but it's what you're going to be giving. Stop thinking about what you're going to receive from this other person and start asking yourself, how far are you willing to give to this person in a healthy way? Because that is how you build a healthy society. That is how you build a healthy country. The reason why the world, I believe, today is falling apart is simply because we have created generations of families that are only thinking about what they could take from their spouses. When children witness parents who are only selfishly taking from the other, who are not selflessly giving to the other, there are plenty of marriages, by the way, that can survive like that. It makes sense, right? He's working, I don't have to work, he's providing, she's making food, he's raising the children, it works out. We could go ahead and create a barter system in marriage, in love, and they think they're in love. And it's the saddest thing in the world for me to see. I see it so often, when really the whole entire relationship is superficial. What happens to a family where one person in that relationship says, I'm not doing it anymore? The whole thing falls apart. And that's the proof there's something wrong with the families. When children witness parents who are selfishly taking from the other and are not selflessly giving to the other, those children intuitively, without even having to say anything, understand that the purpose of life is one thing and one thing alone. It's what can I take from the world and not what I can give to the world. And therefore, if you, like me, want to be someone who's striving to be the best version of themselves, you have to ask yourself, well, how do I become more godly? If God is consistently thinking deeply about how I can give to everyone in a way where I can allow them to retain their independence, right? How am I thinking about doing that with the people that I know? You think it's an accident that these are the people that you're in the room with right now? That these are the people you come in contact with, your friends and your family? It's not an accident. You have exactly what you need. You have exactly what you need to grow into becoming a human being that is truly capable of loving. What happens to the world if we are no longer thinking about what we take, but instead of what we give? You think there would be wars? You think we'd have issues on all the borders and all the countries right now? These issues would fly away. But we've created a world where everyone is thinking about one thing and one thing alone. What can I take from? In that world, there's never enough. And that's not the world you and I want to create. Look at number 7, right? What is it? Mar benachasi, mar beda'aga. Same idea, right? It's number 12. Sorry, number 12, 7. He used to say, the more flesh, the more worms. The more property, the more anxiety. The more wives, the more witchcraft. That makes so much sense to me, by the way. Actually, it doesn't. I have no idea the correlation over there, but maybe in the old days it made sense. Anyway, so the idea of mar benachasi, mar beda'aga. The more things you have, all you're doing is the more worries you have. Look at number 13, famous Gemara. Okay, we're going to finish this. A man suspected of adultery who was hiding in the husband's house. What would you do? Right? The husband entered and was about to eat some food which had been accidentally poisoned by a snake's venom. When the man called out from the hiding place, meaning the lover of that woman, or that woman, the man who was hiding in this man's house, don't eat that! And thereby saved the husband's life. Rabbi concluded from this that he was certainly not guilty of adultery with the wife. For in that case, he would have allowed the husband to die. The Gemara asks, is this not obvious? Replies that we might have thought that the adulterer would prefer the husband to live, so the adulterer could savor the taste of forbidden fruit. Stolen waters taste sweet. What's the Gemara saying? Meaning, you, Rava, your answer that that if he really, really wanted his wife, right, he would have let him die. What's the Gemara saying? No, that's not the way it works. There's a concept in Chazal. Let's say Mayim Gnuvim Yimtaku, right? That's a pasuk in Proverbs. Another one of King Solomon's awesome proverbs, right? Stolen waters are always sweeter. If this man truly, was having an adulterous relation with his wife, he would not want the man to die, so that he could maintain this aspect of stolen waters. It's much better when you got to sneak around and the husband's still alive than when the husband is dead. So you can't use that reasoning, Rabbi. That's what the Gemara is arguing, right? The nature of life is such where the things that we can't have, we want the most of. That's the way it is. The things that you do not want are the things that always taste better. You're on a diet, that pizza is always better. Okay, Tosfot and Darim. Rabbi has to clarify his ruling because it might seem obvious at first. He says that we shouldn't overthink the situation and we should take the evidence face value. The man isn't guilty of adultery, but you might wonder, how can Rabbi be so sure? What if the man had a different reason for saving the husband's life? Answer, that someone guilty of adultery wouldn't think that stolen waters taste sweet. In other words, he wouldn't find that forbidden relationship more exciting just because it was forbidden. He's giving an answer to the question. Okay, move on. Hevel Lima Mar Kohelet, right? Kohelet says everything, all things are hevel, futility. Okay, all things are nothing but dust and vapor. That's the nature of all things. The reality is such that we are driven by material things. This is what drives us. Our ambition is all about, our lust, our desires are all about grabbing all kinds of things. Ooh, I really like that watch. Oh, I need those earrings. Oh, I need that vacation, or whatever the vice is. You figure it out. This is what King Solomon says is hevel. Hevel. Now, I'm a very big believer in enjoying all things on this planet. But you have to be able to first temper your own desires and wants and ask yourself, why do you want those things? What's driving it? If what's driving you is just like, I just need to have it, yeah, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Okay, if you can't quantify, you can't clarify why it is that you're going after that specific thing, be mindful that what you might be is stuck in this I want paradox. And then what ends up happening is you're going to want that thing, you're going to get it, and you know what's going to end up happening? You're not going to be happy. You'll be happy for a minute. And by the way, there are people that do this their whole lives. They think their happiness is tied to satiating their desires. Oh, I really want that. It's going to make me happy if I have it. Spoiler alert, it won't. Sorry. Right? Hevel havelim amar kohelet. It's all hevel. Right? Look at number 17. I love this piece in Rav Dessler. He says, another thing we must realize that the concept of owning or possessing property can often be misleading. My property is not my own in the same way my arms and my legs or my thoughts are my own. No one could ever own an outside object so that it becomes united with him and part of him, like his body, let alone his soul. The concept of ownership must be defined operationally. It means simply that certain objects are used by person X and are not to be taken by someone else without his permission. It goes ill with the person who yearns to attach himself to that to which it is not possible to attach oneself. I love that line. Say that 10 times. His desire can never be gratified and will be left with nothing but pain. Happy is the person whose desire is to increase the acquisition of his true self, his soul. Nothing can prevent him from feeling his desire, and there is no force in the world that can ever deprive him of such an acquisition. He is happy and secure in this world and in the next. My friends, this piece of Rav Dessler is what the goal of marriage is. The goal of marriage is not to fall in love. The goal of marriage is to recognize that you truly are one. The greatest gift that God can give you is the ability to recognize you're something more. It's interesting when it says, Lo tov liot adam levado, it's not good for man to be left alone. Aselo ezer kenegdo, right? Why did God create man first whole, male and female in one body, and then split them in half? Just seems so inefficient. And it creates so many issues for me as a campus rabbi. So you see, God created man both male and female, Rabbi, right? And so you see, gender is fluid. No, that's not what was happening there, right? So why does God create both male and female in one body and then split them up? It's very simple, my friends. It's to help you recognize that when you're together, right? Each of you are two halves. You become a whole. A male and a female coming together, you know what you have now? You have one. If you would have created male and female separate, and they would come together, you know what you'd have two. And Hashem doesn't want that. He wants you to yearn, to long for this other person. He wants you to have this deep desire for you to achieve this state of unity. And that state of unity could only come through the humbling of the self. Machzir shekel. It's interesting, last week we spoke about the idea of machzir shekel. Why do you have to give half a shekel? Anyone know what the value of a whole shekel is? The Torah says it's 20 grera, which means a half a shekel is only 10 grera. The word agura comes from the word grera. Okay, so now it's interesting that the only place in the world that I'm aware of where a half a shekel is a whole number is in Judaism. So the whole purpose of giving that half a shekel is to humble you. But you can't be humbled unless you know that you're worth something. That's not humility. Humility is when you are aware of your value and you make yourself lower. It's not about destroying yourself. Same is true in marriage. In marriage, it doesn't work when you destroy yourself and you just make yourself into a shmata. No one wants to be married to a shmata. When each of you recognize your full worth and you're still willing to give to the other unconditionally, that's where the two of you achieve something crazy called unity, where you can become one. You can attach yourself to something and become one. Benzoma says, number 18. The pasuk says, that's what we want. I don't want to have a world, a life where I'm eating and eating and eating and I'm never satiated. I don't want to live in a world where I have all these desires that I can't go ahead and fulfill. No, there's a bracha that God creates. You can get yourself to a place where your needs, your wants are truly satiated. Perkei Avot says, Ezu chacham, halomem kol adam, Ezu gibor, kovesh et yotzro, Ezu hashir. Who's the rich guy? God bless you and your family and all the Jewish people. Ezu hashir, hasamer bechalko. Who is the true wealthy person? Not the guy that has 500 million that turned into 1 million with all of his servants. The person that first is able to be at peace with the things that he or she has. My friends, that's real simcha. That's real happiness. Chazde Hashem kilo tamnu kikolu rachamav. The loving kindness of Hashem, which are unending, and His mercies, which have no limits. Hashem truly wants to give you anything and everything, but in order for you to receive all those things, He wants you to transform yourself and to become Etzal Elokim. He wants you to recognize that you are everything inside of you, and when you're fully able to receive and to recognize that you have everything that you need, you will be free. But that freedom comes from a choice that each of us has to make. Do you want to live a life of unending ambition and desire that can never be satiated through the pursuit of all physical things? Or are you here to recognize that the truest purpose of life is to give? How many people in this room have called just to say, I really want to volunteer, I want to help out? Right? I want to give back my time. I want to donate. I want to be able to support. I want to provide. The people that are able to do that, it doesn't have to be here, I don't care where it happens, when you're able to give more of yourself, when you're spending more time thinking about what you can do for others. I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourselves. Self-care is super important. I'm not saying you don't take care of yourself. Don't misquote me. But you need to be working on thinking about what you can do for the world around you for you to achieve a higher level of happiness and growth. In this way, my friends, I truly believe we bring Mashiach. In that merit, may we see our hostages returned. May this war come to an end, and may we all be free, living in a world of true love and happiness. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.